Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us again on the Illinois Channel as Jeff Berkowitz and I are going to be looking at some of the major issues that have happened over the last week. Jeff and I are going to be normally looking at a lot of the campaign activity that's been going on and will be going on in the fall here, both at the state level and at the presidential level, and maybe some of the congressional races that really matter around the country. But Jeff, this week, one of the big issues that kind of is developing, we've heard about it before, but it starts to bubble up a little more to the future, is this, or to the top, I should say, is this possible, this investigation. There's so much smoke going on around this that we don't have all the details, but involving ComEd and the possible influence of Speaker Madigan and what he may or may not have done as a part of that. And that is, as we tape this, yesterday there was supposed to be a Illinois State House committee hearing on this, and they kind of punted on that issue.
They did, Terry, because there's some things they don't know that we know, luckily, and our viewers will soon know. It turns out if we scroll back to 1998 or so, about 20 years ago, 21 years ago, I was doing some legal recruiting, and one of my clients was ComEd. And one of the things they asked me to do, 1998, we were entering a new era. People may not remember, ComEd was once thought of as the sleepy little public utility, a monopoly, as we'd say in economics. They didn't really face any competition. And we were told that competition was on its way. Deregulation was hitting Illinois, as many states. And ComEd said, we need somebody who knows something about competition and operating in that business environment that's not a monopoly, but competitive. And who do we get, Jeff? And I had been an antitrust lawyer before, and I said, what you need is a good, solid antitrust lawyer. And we talked, and we developed specifications, and we went out and we looked, and we found somebody at McDermott, Will & Emery, who was an antitrust lawyer, as I believe, remember at the time, senior associate, junior partner type, in her, say, 40-ish, been there 9 or 10 years at that law firm, brought her into in-house, become an in-house lawyer at ComEd for approximately the princely sum of about $110K a year, okay? That person was Ann Pramaggiore, and she was, over that time of 2 decades, to go from the law department as a low-level inside lawyer to the general counsel at ComEd, which is higher level, to the business side, and then to ComEd as the CEO, and then to senior vice president, Exelon Utilities, and then more recently, she resigned in 2019. She was the CEO. It is reported that when the deferred prosecution agreement, which is an agreement between ComEd and
the federal government, who's investigating this.
Thank you very much. The U.S. Attorney, John Lausch. So, as Ron Safer said, he was actually an advisor, counsel to.
And let me insert, because I think we're starting to lose the forest for the trees here.
Okay.
The big picture is there's a federal investigation going on into possible influence peddling that involves ComEd.
Absolutely.
And we don't know, but it's being investigated about whether or not House Speaker Michael Madigan used his influence to do a quid pro quo deal with ComEd, and whether or not there was some shenanigans going on. We are not saying that. That is what is under investigation by the federal government. Now, to that end, I think you were, let me bring back to where you were commenting on what was the agreement you're talking about, the
deferred prosecution agreement, the agreement between the U.S. Attorney, John Lausch, who is one of 100 or so U.S. attorneys around the country. He is the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, right, which represents Chicago.
And what does it say in that deferred prosecution agreement that you bring it to our attention?
There's a bunch of this, the whole thing, including appendices, maybe 40 or 50 pages. But the short of it, they use jargon. They say public official A, and they call it says the speaker, but they don't use Mike Madigan's name. They talk about CEO 1, Chief Executive Officer 1, and they don't say it. but it's reported by WBEZ, by the Sun-Times, the Chicago Tribune, by Rich Miller on his Capital Facts blog. It's reported that that CEO is Anne Pramaggiore. Okay. And we're less clear about others who are viewed as sometimes called the senior executive consultant. We can get into that as well. But it is clear, it is beyond dispute that the U.S. Attorney and ComEd have entered into this agreement, which involves a fine of, I think, about $200 million and an agreement to cooperate. That is, ComEd is going to cooperate with the U.S. Attorney. They have done an investigation. I assume that information, that their investigation, ComEd, has been, I assume, been made available, I don't know, to the U.S. Attorney. And when the U.S. Attorney wants information, ComEd is cooperating. And so to that end, what do we know happened last week? Last week, we had the first called a criminal case filed by the U.S. Attorney's Office involving Fidel Marquez, who is thought to be what's referred to in the DPA, the Deferred Prosecution Agreement, as a senior executive. Okay, and he was a long time senior vice president at ComEd for government relations. Okay. So now we're into somebody. It is viewed, you don't usually file a criminal information unless that person is going to plead guilty. So we have now the first person who could possibly be turning state's evidence, who could be providing testimony should this go to trial. Mind you, Speaker Madigan, all of these are allegations. There's no indictment yet. There's no official charge. But everybody, all the public reporting, Terry, as you know, is that this is an alleged arrangement between Speaker Mike Madigan and ComEd with go-betweens, with other people who are involved.
So let me,
and we've mentioned one.
Let me just insert, you know, Jeff and I always have to sit on the fence here a little bit. When you talk about an investigation, we don't want to, number one, be indicting someone through our own comments. And number two, just to explain this, as Jeff was doing, I know it's hard sometimes to follow all the machinations of an investigation that is ongoing and where we're looking from outside the window, so to speak. But one of the things that, Jeff, this is going to have an impact on, while the investigation is going on, and we are having this come to light increasingly during the fall campaign. And so it's putting political pressure on those who are currently office holders, those who are running for the State House. And people are going to be asking those who are on the Democratic side of the aisle, would you support Mike Madigan again as the House Speaker? They're going to be under pressure to come up with an answer whether or not they would vote, if elected, to have Mike Madigan again as the Speaker. And since Mike Madigan has basically held that since around 1983, except for 2 years, the longest serving House Speaker in the history of the nation, this could be a major change for Illinois, because this investigation, whether or not Speaker Madigan is involved in this or not politically, it could still have the implications of possibly driving him from office. Now, earlier this week, Governor Pritzker was making a statement about the census in Decatur, but he was asked by one of the reporters to comment about some of this news that was coming out, and let's just take a listen to what he had to say.
There are implications, but no explicit information that would give you the answers to the questions that I think most people would ask. But I don't know what those questions will be in total. What I can tell you is that we need to hear much more, and I've encouraged people to ask those questions, and I have said that it is vital that the Speaker speak up and tell us what exactly is being implied in those documents. And until we hear that, it's very hard to make a judgment. What I know is that it's dissatisfying to hear simply the implications and without the rest of the information.
So there you have it. Even the governor right now, you can see he's trying to thread the needle, so to speak. He doesn't want to be accusing the Speaker of something. On the other hand, he's trying to make a statement, and basically he's saying, I don't even know what questions are the right questions to ask. So the audience, I hope will forgive us if we're muddying the waters here, but like everyone, we're trying to report on what is developing while the story is yet in the process of being developed.
Right. And one thing we do know, Terry, and people have been talking about this, that is, they've been talking about a process in Illinois for several decades. ComEd has been viewed by people writing about it, been talking about this, reported the media. ComEd has been viewed as tremendously influential. That is, they have given an enormous they have scattered contributions and campaign contributions around the state legislature. There's various state reps, state senators, Democrat and Republican. So when they want something, they have a lot of friends, so to speak. Okay, and the person who everybody says it's almost political science 101 in Illinois. Mike Madigan, Speaker Mike Madigan, is not just the most powerful politician in the state of Illinois, always viewed as more powerful than whoever happens to be governor, said to be perhaps one of the most powerful politicians throughout the country. He has been there for 37 years as speaker, except for what they say was a coffee break, 1995 and 96, when for 2 years the Republicans held the speakership. So over that time, he has built up tremendous influence, many relationships with lobbyists, with other folks, and so forth. And so that is who Mike Madigan is. As you know, Terry, he is known as the Velvet Hammer because he comes down on people like a hammer, but it's done so smooth. It's like that hammer, that anvil was protected with velvet. So, so that is the background. Okay, and when you go through the deferred prosecution agreement, you see names. As we say, they have code names, but it is reported. It is reported that one of the individuals mentioned in the deferred prosecution agreement is thought to be Jay Doherty, previous longtime president of the City Club of Chicago. And it is reported through the deferred prosecution agreement and emails and other items is that Jay Doherty received over 8 years $3 million to funnel to other to operatives thought to be helpful to Mike Madigan, who he wanted to benefit. And it was reported that Jay Doherty is registered, I guess, as a lobbyist in Chicago, and $500,000 was all he had reported. I think that other $2.5 million was not reported because it wasn't going, apparently, I guess might be argued, to Jay Doherty. It was going to these others, and he was funneling. Those are the allegations. That is the narrative that is being told by media around the state of Illinois. Okay.
All right. So here's the thing. We're going to keep our eye on this, and we basically, the big picture is this. There's an investigation going on. ComEd has already pled guilty. You have a Republican appointed U.S. attorney who is doing an investigation into this. And so it is different than the Obama years where, you know, they kind of weren't looking toward what was necessarily going on behind the scenes in northern Illinois. But now this is going on, and we're going to keep our fingers on the
say one thing just to whet our viewers' appetite coming back next week. Going ahead to another part of the DPA, the Deferred Prosecution Agreement, September 2018. CEO 1, thought to be Ann Pramaggiore, says to individual A, thought to be somebody close to Mike Madigan. Won't go into who that is. And it is alleged in the DPA that CEO 1 says to individual A, you take good care of me, and so does our friend, public official A. Okay, that's said to be the speaker. I will do the best I can to take care of you. And at that time, according to the DPA, representatives on behalf of Mike Madigan were asking for a board member to be appointed, a specific board member to be appointed by ComEd to their board of directors. And that's what Ann is saying. You take good care of me, I'll take good care of you. Essentially, it is alleged, she's saying, I will see what I can do about getting this person you want appointed to the
Would I be
board.
right to, let me jump in, would I be right to say that the point of this is, it's question about that Michael Madigan allegedly was having ComEd hire people that Madigan wanted hired. It was a way for Madigan to pay off, allegedly, some of the people that were working within his organization. They could get them a job at ComEd, they could get maybe their kids a job at ComEd, and that instead of using the Democratic Party of Illinois' money, ComEd was basically contributing, either directly or indirectly, to what Mike Madigan wanted. And the allegation would be that in compensation for that, when ComEd had legislation it wanted passed, Michael Madigan, who controls the entire functioning of the House, would make sure that the legislation that ComEd wanted would be greased and go through the House. That is
And
the
that's
big
what
picture.
happened. And that, in the big
We
picture,
don't know
that's
that
what
that
happened.
is the case, but that is basically what people need to be following and what the investigation is looking at.
And it is alleged that in 2015, 2016, when major legislation favoring or favorable to ComEd passed the Illinois legislature and became law, that allowed them to set rates that would cover a lot of their costs they weren't sure they could cover. We won't go into those details, but that happened. That legislation passed. Did it happen in the way you've just described? That's what the U.S. Attorney is continuing to look at. That's what possibly they will be filing a formal complaint with indictments. That's what there could be a trial about. And so all of that is laid out in the deferred prosecution agreement. All of that is laid out in reporting and emails and so forth. And as you said, we have long known there's patronage in Illinois. We have long known that people who politicians want to help, they get jobs in the state of Illinois, that pay a fair amount of money, and in return, work is done. And we thought that it stopped. This is an attempt allegedly to set up a system where ComEd, in a sense, is handing out patronage. Being on the board of ComEd pays, in addition to perks, $78,000 a year. And of course, it carries with it a lot of influence. If a person can get somebody put on the board of ComEd, I mean, the speaker, in talking generally about this, about the allegations that he made recommendations, said everybody makes recommendations. Mr. Durkin, you've made recommendations for jobs. I haven't heard of Leader Durkin recommending somebody to be put on the board and then have that happen. That is an order of magnitude different from what Speaker Madigan refers to when he says, hey, everybody makes recommendations.
Right, okay.
So
So
the gravity of the situation, the seriousness, the level of it, it's unheard of.
yeah, well, and the other thing is, I've already mentioned, the gravity is that Speaker Madigan, the longest-serving House Speaker in the history of the nation, who controls all the legislation, who Governor Rauner found out was more powerful than the governor, he has been what some people say is the cork in the bottle, that nothing can get past him. That if Madigan were to lose his House, not his House seat in the election, that's not going to happen, but he could lose perhaps his speakership. Even if nothing comes of this federal investigation, there could be enough political pressure and people, even within his party, who secretly, they don't want to come out and say it because they fear his power, but would like to have him no longer be the speaker. They would like to have someone else, maybe Greg Harris, be the speaker.
But Terry, there's a flip side to what you're saying. You're pointing out that Speaker Madigan could fall and there could be a tremendous change, but he's not going quietly into the night, because Grant Worley, who's on the Special Investigations Committee you mentioned, who's one of the
Republican
Republican
House
members,
member, yeah.
right, has a contest going on for state rep, and his Democratic opponent has apparently raised now $500,000 to maybe 120,000 or so for Grant Worley. And where do you think that $500,000 came from? Okay, and do you think possibly Speaker Madigan had something to do with it? He wants people to know he ain't gone yet. And you're going to stand up and go after Speaker Madigan?
Well,
he's coming
Mike
back.
Madigan knows how to wield power. He didn't become the longest serving House Speaker in the history of the United States because he doesn't know how politics works.
Right, and just as an indication of that, the margin in the State House is 74 Democrats to 44 Republicans, and it is said that Speaker Mike would like to make that a little larger in November. And of course, there's the big tax, we may get to this, there's the big tax boost coming up on November 3rd, and of course, that is the governor's baby, and Speaker Madigan could be very helpful to that, or he could be not. And the governor, as he pushes for that
Let
big
me
tax
jump in.
boost,
We only have about 9 minutes left. I want to
jump.
jump to one of the big races happening that we've been covering in the past and will continue to, is the race for the 6th congressional district. One of the things that happened is this week, Pat Brady, the former Republican chairman of Illinois, the former chairman of the Illinois Republican Party, came out against Republican candidate Jeanne Ives, former state representative, who is the Republican nominee. Let's listen quickly to a commercial where Brady says why he can't support Jeanne Ives.
I'm Pat Brady, a lifelong Republican, but I can't support Jeanne Ives for Congress. Ives makes Trump look reasonable. She's attacked same-sex families, even questioned the science behind climate change and the coronavirus. Ives is on the wrong side of history.
Okay, so Ives allegedly is on the wrong side of history. But Jeff, you interviewed Pat Brady not too long ago, a couple of years ago.
2 years.
Far fringe, not Jeanne, but the profs and the Tillmans and Roebling, I think, buys into this, that specialize in losing elections. By using that kind of rhetoric and taking that kind of approach. If you look at what happened in the last election, again, I give Jeanne your credit, but she lost. All these guys that ran on that kind of, we hate everybody, we think that ad.
Do you think John Tillman says we hate? Do you
know
know John?
I know John very well. I know the
You
policies.
think he's a hater?
I think that Liberty's Principles PAC, and I think Dan Proft and that crew, they're all aligned together. I think they spread a message of hate, and that doesn't mean it's good.
Well, she did come within, what, 20,000 votes?
So that was a long interview you did with Brady, but the point is, and he kind of said right up the top, not Jeanne Ives. So now he's saying he can't support her because, in part, that ad that ran, and yet 2 years ago he was defending her, really kind of blaming other people for putting together that ad.
And the important point is the focus now, for at least for the next 20 seconds, is not on Jeanne Ives. Oh no, it's on Pat Brady, because as you probably know, Terry, a joint statement was released by the current state GOP chair, not somebody from 10 years ago or whenever Pat was there, current state GOP chair, Tim Schneider, the current RNC representatives, Republican National Committee representatives, Richard Porter and Demonte, saying this: identifying and labeling Pat Brady as a Republican is false and misleading. If you spend all of your time attacking, and betraying Republicans, whether out of newfound convictions or to continue booking TV appearances, you are a Democrat. That comes from Richard Porter, Demonte, RNC members, Republican National Committee members, and the Illinois State GOP chairman, Tim Schneider.
So you know Pat Brady, I know Pat
issue.
Brady, and what, is Pat Brady a Republican in your mind or not?
I don't think at this point he is. He's certainly not supporting Trump.
You say he is a Republican?
Republican.
You said he is.
No, I'm sorry, he is not. He is not. If you haven't supported Trump, you didn't support Trump in 2016, you have a person who 2 years ago, Jeanne Ives, you said, oh no, she's okay, she's not a hater. And now she's become so bad. Why? Because he goes on to add, well, she's got concerns about climate change. Terry, I think you've got concerns about climate change.
A lot of people have. But the idea that 99% or whatever they say of the scientists believe in climate change is not true. I mean, you can believe what you want, and I'm not a scientist, I don't know. I'm not saying definitively one way or the other, but to say that the debate is settled is not true. There's any number of people. You can go on YouTube and you have Nobel Prize winning scientists saying that this climate change is wrong. So the fact that Jeanne Ives would question it, I mean, she's in good company, by people who question it.
Well, more to the point, what was it, 68 years she was there as a state rep? She ran against the incumbent governor in the Republican primary, came within, what, 70,000 votes or fewer of beating him?
Yeah.
Of beating him? And he's saying she's no Republican? Oh, no, no. Pat Brady's no Republican at this point.
Look, the thing is, this is a fascinating election for a variety of reasons. And in part because we have this race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And we didn't know Donald Trump before. We now all know Donald Trump. And the House is now controlled by the Democrats. That's why they impeached Donald Trump. But the Republicans would love to take the House back. And if they're going to do that, they need to win back these seats, like the 6th, like the 14th. Jeanne Ives is a Republican candidate in the 6th. The Republicans need to pick these up if they have a shot at winning back the House. Let me play a clip from an interview I did earlier this year with Jeanne Ives, where she was saying the importance of this race.
It is going to be quite a fight here in this district, and I think it's going to be a race that is watched nationwide, as control of this Congress will really, hedge on whether or not we can win back this seat. It's also very interesting in that there's going to be such a contrast in this race between the Democrat who is running, Sean Casten, and myself, and we're happy to draw that contrast.
So yeah, quite a distinction between Sean Casten and Jeanne Ives. Jeanne Ives certainly is one of the more conservative members of, she would be one of the most conservative members of Congress. She was one of the most conservative members of the Illinois House of Representatives during the 6 years she was there. And, you either really like Jeanne Ives because of where she stands or you oppose her because of that. But one thing she is not is wishy-washy. Jeanne Ives has some very hard-felt principles. She's a graduate of West Point. And Jeff, it's one of the primary races that I think that we should all be watching around the country, but certainly you and I are going to be following this as we get further into the fall.
Right, and we'd certainly like to speak with both of them more. You've already spoken with Jeanne. I would like to do that, like to talk to Sean Casten, because very much these issues in the 6th Congressional District, to some extent, they crystallize the issues that will be faced in battleground races in the House and the Senate, and indeed for presidency around the country. Things like climate change, things like the new Green Deal. Does the 6th Congressional District favor that? Would it be helpful to people's jobs and economic interests and day-to-day life to have the new Green Deal adopted? Would that be helpful to the 6th Congressional District? As people point out, Wheaton almost is very close to Kenosha, Wisconsin. We've just seen what's happening in Kenosha with the breakdown of law and order. Would Wheaton like to have that with other areas in the 6th Congressional District? So law and order, and having respect for private property, respect from people's jobs and their lives, that is now at stake around the country. It's not a scare tactic. If you've seen Seattle, CNN shows us that. We believe your eyes. What's going on in Seattle? What's going on in Portland? What's going on in St. Louis? Just believe your eyes, okay? And now you take that around the country. Those are the issues. It's the economy, stupid, it's COVID, it's law and order. This is what the race comes down to, I think, between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, right?
Well, certainly among the top things, there's a whole lot of issues that we got to look at, but the law and order is one, the economy is one, how COVID has been handled. Well, Jeff, sadly, we're out of time, and so we hope to thank you for watching. We'll look to see you again next week.